Before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join.
Howdy partner, my name's Devin on Pub Stomp MTG, and here we're going to talk about Rakdos the Muscle. And I'm not going to do that voiceover the whole entire time, I just wanted to do it for the intro. Also, since we are all wearing hats in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, I might as well include myself. And so let's discuss Rakdos. I think it's a pretty powerful commander, and let's discuss what he can do for us if you do make a deck around him. So Rakdos the Muscle does read for 2 double black and a red, legendary creature, demon mercenary. Love the typing with a mercenary. He does have flying and trample as a 6/5 body. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of target player's library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. Sacrifice another creature, Rakdos the Muscle gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it, activate only once each turn. So based off of the reading, there's a lot of things going on with it. Of course, you can exile not only your library. So just evaluating this commander and reading what it does, if anything else, it's a 5 mana flying trample 6/5 body. That's pretty insane just on the power creep alone. I know we've been getting a lot of power creep here and there with that Sandworm and also Anzrak the Quake Mole, but this by itself is pretty powerful having those combination of stats. But of course there is more stuff he can do. He is a sack outlet in the command zone. Obviously you could only activate that ability of sacrificing something once each turn, so there is a little bit of a downside. Say for example somebody tries to remove Rakdos with a destroy spell, you could tap it to sacrifice a creature, and then somebody else could in response just hit Rakdos again, and so that does feel a little bad, but I don't feel like that's going to happen a lot more than you think. But I do really like that first ability because it kind of goes in with the second ability because you're sacrificing things. And one thing that I did notice first reading it is you exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of target player's library. You could target anybody, and technically you're targeting with a crime with Rakdos, which is ironic enough. So you could exile cards from your top of your library or your opponent's top of the library, so you could go into a little bit of a theft theme, which is pretty interesting for a Rakdos color combination deck. And so there's a lot of ways you could build around this. Of course, you could just go Voltron and swing away and just try to make him indestructible every so often, but I don't think that's really the play to go. Of course, you can go into that sacrifice theme, which I think would be more powerful. You definitely want more sacrifice effects than just Rakdos himself, especially if you want to go into more combo synergy. And so with that said, let's discuss Rakdos and how we would build around him. There are a lot of one-off spells that we could take advantage of. For example, Song, Mad Treachery, and Zealous Conscripts. There are a lot of cards like these that are in the deck. You could use the link down below in the description with Moxfield to check out the full list, but I wanted to focus on these specifically because they just gain control of target creature until end of turn. They also give a haste, and then later on we could sacrifice them with Rakdos. But why go small with one creature when you could go big with Insurrection? Untap all creatures and gain control of all of them until end of turn. They gain haste until end of turn. So unfortunately with Rakdos, it's only a once per turn clause. You can't sacrifice a creature to give himself indestructible, but you do have many options where you can sacrifice all the other creatures. But if you are playing Insurrection, most likely you're going to be winning depending on how much cards are on the battlefield. There is also literally Satan himself with the Beast, Deathrite Prince. So this isn't the Doctor Who set, so technically it's not Satan, but technically it is, but it's off the fantasy set with Doctor Who. I like this as a theft option, but more importantly I like it for that second ability. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to its owner, untap the Beast and draw a card. So whether we steal creatures with some of our options, or if we take creatures from our opponent's libraries with Rakdos ability, we can get some card draw when we connect with those creatures. I do think Sauron the Lidless Eye is another great option in the deck. Of course, it does have that hijack effect, but it does have a way to basically give our creatures +2/+0 until end of turn, and each opponent will lose 2 life. If we have a lot of mana lying around, we can just pump that spell constantly into our creatures to potentially win the game there, because either way, whether we swing with our creatures
Each opponent will lose 2 life when we trigger this each time, so I do like this effect specifically in the aggressive strategy. Those examples are one-off spells, but why not take control of creatures constantly by using Captivating Crew and Coercive Recruiter? With Captivating Crew, just depending on how much mana you do have lying around, you could just gain control of target creature by paying 4 mana, and then of course we could just sacrifice it later with one of our effects. And Coercive Recruiter, we do have a decent amount of pirates in our deck to trigger that ability to gain control of another creature. Another card I personally do like in this list is Angrath the Flame Chained. His +1 is pretty decent. Each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life, but his -3 is really what we're looking at. Gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap it, it gains haste until end of turn, sacrifice that at the beginning of the next end step if its converted mana cost is 3 or less. Also, if you somehow get to that -8, that would be definitely devastating for your opponents. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in his or her graveyard. So of course this is probably one of the cooler planeswalkers that you can be playing anyways, and it does basically align with our commander and what he wants to do. But let's also move on to sacrifice outlets. Of course our commander is a sacrifice outlet, but we're only going to be able to sacrifice once each turn, so we'll definitely want other ways we could sacrifice things basically for free or almost free. Some notable free sacrifice outlets are Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, and Goblin Bombardment. I like specifically Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar because if we are sacrificing things with Rakdos and triggering that ability to basically exile the top cards of our library or our opponent's library, we need some mana to play those spells, so we could take advantage of these ones specifically. Of course with Goblin Bombardment, it's another great way just to sacrifice a creature for free, and we could deal some damage to any target. Another noteworthy sacrifice outlet, technically not at any time but at a specific instance, is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. I love this card so much. A lot of people should be playing this more in their decks, even if it's in the 99. So why am I so high on this card? Let's read what it does. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a type. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So of course if you do hijack a creature, to add insult to injury, you could just sacrifice it and make an opponent have to have the choice of sacrificing another creature they have or lose 2 life and you draw a card. So the effect is basically you make each people sacrifice a permanent that shares a permanent that you sacrificed with, or you get to draw 3 cards and make each player lose 2 life, or do a mix between those things. So I have been putting this in more decks, and honestly a lot more people should because it's absolutely amazing, especially for card draw. Not a lot of people want to be sacrificing their permanents, so honestly a great one overall in my opinion. In this deck you also want to have a lot of sacrifice payoffs to really get the benefit out of Rakdos and all the other cards that you are abusing. So if anything else, you could use a card like Skullclamp. This is absolutely perfect in this deck because obviously with Rakdos being a sacrifice outlet, you could just equip Skullclamp to another creature you control, then sacrifice it with Rakdos, and then just draw 2 cards. That's simple enough, all just for 1 mana. I do also think Mayhem Devil will be putting in some serious work in this deck because whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. That's any kind of permanent, whether somebody's fetching for a land, whether we're sacrificing a card on the battlefield. The longer this is around on the board, the longer it is going to be putting pressure on your opponents, and so that's why I wanted to give it a mention. Another great recurable piece that we can put in our deck is Poxwalkers. So for 2 and a black, it does have Death Touch, and whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tab. This heavily synergizes with Rakdos in many different ways, of course, because we are exiling the top cards of our opponent's libraries or our own library. With this, we may exile cards that we can't cast and then return it back to the battlefield, sacrifice it again, maybe with one of our other sacrifice outlets, to repeat the process by casting more and more spells from exile. So seriously, this is going to provide such great utility in the deck. It's going to be an auto-include for sure. I do also like the Kamigawa dragons with Atsushi and also Junji. Atsushi has some great synergy of exiling cards from our library so that we could play them, or we could get some treasure tokens so that we have the mana to play our other spells that we do steal. And with Junji, it does act as a great discard effect, or we could reanimate another creature in our graveyard that's not a dragon. So either way, they're providing great value off of when we sacrifice them. Of course, you could be really mean and definitely have your playgroup not want to play with you again if you play cards like Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos. Whenever you're sacrificing a creature, all your opponents are going to be sacrificing a creature. This is just going to be brutal on the board. Another card I did want to highlight that's not necessarily going with the sacrifice theme is Prosper Tomebound. Since we are playing cards from our opponent's library or our own library, and they are from exile, Prosper Tomebound is going to be an absolute value engine, mainly because whenever we play a card from exile, we create a treasure token, so each time we do cast a spell, it's going to be just creating more and more treasure tokens for us. So absolutely a great card in the deck. Obviously, I just thought about this right now while I was editing, and I thought this is just a great include to add in here. I will say there's also a combo that you can take advantage of with Rakdos. This is a pretty common combo that you can use in any kind of game, especially with zombies. So you'll basically have a card like Rakdos the Muscle, Phyrexian Altar, Gravecrawler, and another zombie on the battlefield. So because of Rakdos' creature, whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value on top of a target player's library until your next end step. You may play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. So you don't just have to sacrifice from Rakdos' ability. If you do have a free sack outlet like Phyrexian Altar on the battlefield, you could take advantage of Gravecrawler. And Gravecrawler simply says you may cast Gravecrawler from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie, so obviously you need another zombie on the battlefield to trigger this. You could then sacrifice Gravecrawler to Phyrexian Altar to add a black mana. Rakdos will trigger to exile the top card of an opponent's library, and then you can recast Gravecrawler from the graveyard, again as long as you have another zombie on the battlefield. You can cast it without floating black mana, and then you can repeat the process to sacrifice it to Phyrexian Altar to repeat Rakdos' ability to exile everybody's library besides yours. Then after that, you could just pass to your opponents with no library, and then they will lose the game. So of course, if you do want to go for that combo with Rakdos, you're more than welcome to. It's great either way. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Rakdos the Muscle. Of course, this can be a pretty salt-inducing commander because not a lot of people do like the theft option in Commander, because most people like to keep their stuff like me. But if you are an absolute degenerate like me, let me know down below in the comments, how would you build around Rakdos? I would love to hear your feedback and thoughts. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.